Hello, I'm Dr. Schultz, and today I'd like to talk to you about one of the most important systems in your body, your digestion, your assimilation, and your elimination. And even more importantly, how to keep those systems and organs clean, toned, and working great so you stay at your optimum health. My 8 clinical herbal formula for your digestion and elimination are my intestinal formula number 1, my new intestinal formula number 1, maximum strength, my intestinal formula number 2, my 5-day bowel detox program, my brand new bowel flush shot, my intestinal formula number 3, my digestive tonic, and my new digestive shot. In this introduction, I want to talk to you about some of my personal experiences in life and in the clinic that really brought about my realization for the need for many herbal formula and strong and powerful herbal formula and effective herbal formula to keep your digestion working, your assimilation working, and your elimination working. You know, as a kid, some of my first memories were being horribly constipated. In my household, imagine my mother, my father, me and my brother living. One bathroom was typical in a house in those days, and we had one bathroom, and it was kind of centrally located in the house. So when you went to the bathroom, pretty much everybody knew about it. And I used to remember my dad going in there only about once a week and taking sometimes the Sunday newspaper with him, and he wouldn't come out for an hour or hours. And when he came out, it smelled like death in there, and there was almost a green cloud floating around in the house. And I remember my own bowel experiences being about the same. I remember that I would have one bowel movement a week, usually on a Saturday or Sunday. I don't know why I timed it that way. And it would be very hard, very black, little hard marbles or logs. I almost felt like they were going to chip the porcelain on the toilet when they came out of me. And my brother was horribly constipated too. And we had this great German family of constipation, probably due to our food program that almost had 0 fiber in it because of the amount of animal food in it. We had blood for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert. But then when I was old enough to go to school, it didn't get much better. In school, I remember having to raise 1 finger if you wanted to go pee and 2 if you had to go have a bowel movement. And anybody who raised 2 fingers was a jerk, and all the kids laughed. So I learned early on in kindergarten and 1st grade, never, ever raise 2 fingers. So you'd lie, go to the bathroom, have a bowel movement, but God forbid you had any gas or any noise in that bathroom that just happened to be located beautifully right inside the classroom, right off the classroom, a door. If you had any gas or smell, well, you were ostracized and pretty much no one would talk to you for at least a good week. So I learned as a kid, survival was never having a bowel movement in school. And you know, as you get older, it doesn't get much better. We go around and look for bathrooms and public restrooms when we're out and about, and there's very few. There's little or none. Often you go to a restaurant and they say, well, you can only use the bathroom if you eat here. And God forbid, if I ate at most of these restaurants, I wouldn't have to have a bowel movement. So it really doesn't get much better as an adult. But enough about me. Let me tell you some stories from my clinic, from the first year of my clinical practice, my clinical experience, that really taught me about the importance of keeping a healthy digestion and keeping good elimination and staying away from the doctors and their knives. You know, in the first year of my clinic, a woman came to see me. She was having some real horrible problems with menopause and also with depression that kind of came with her menopause. But in the first visit, talking with her, I could feel that there was something more. And she started telling me a story about her young daughter. Her daughter had been horribly constipated as a baby and as a toddler and as a kid. And as she got older, her daughter's constipation just got worse and worse. And eventually, around the age of 11, she wouldn't have any bowel movements at all. They had to take her to the hospital and to the doctor's office to actually have enemas and sometimes to get the fecal matter, the dried, hardened fecal matter, literally pulled out of her by the doctor. It was a horrible story, and she was in a lot of pain and discomfort. She developed some bowel disease because of this, some bowel bleeding. They went in and cauterized some of her bowel, a very horrible and painful procedure. And eventually, the medical doctors suggested that this girl get an ileostomy. Now, many of you have heard of a colostomy, where they remove a section of your bowel and actually put a stoma or a surgical hole on your lower abdomen where you glue a bag for the rest of your life, and then your fecal matter goes into that bag. But for this girl, they suggested an ileostomy, where they take the last part of your small intestine, also called an ileum, and that's where this name comes from, ileostomy, the entire removal of her bowel. And then they would put this bag, attach it to the end of her small intestine, where much more liquid feces comes out into the plastic bag. Of course, the family was horrified, but the doctors suggested that it wasn't that invasive of a surgery and that a lot of people live comfortably that way. So they did perform the surgery. And when that girl woke up in the hospital, well, you can imagine she was horrified. But the doctor said, look, you know, time will heal all things, and in a while she'll feel better. But she went home and she was depressed for months. So the mom, who was in my office with menopause, was telling me that on her 16th birthday, she decided to give her a sweet 16 party and invite all her friends and even buy her a new party dress to lift up her spirits. And she did, and they had the party. And during one of the more romantic moments of the party, this young lady was dancing with her new boyfriend, and she felt something hot, and her bag had come unglued. Her warm fecal contents spilled all over her, her new dress, her boyfriend. Obviously, she went screaming out of the room, up to her room, crying all night. The party was over, and her mom said, well, I felt she'd be better, you know, by the morning, a good night's sleep. And when her mom went up to her room in the morning, she had hung herself and killed herself. Now, that was one of my first clinical horror stories of extreme constipation. And I just wish I would have been there before that whole medical nightmare had happened, but I wasn't. Life is so wonderful, and it presents you with so many great blessings and opportunities. And as it happened, the very next week, parents of an 11-year-old boy called me who was severely constipated. In fact, he was so constipated they couldn't remember when he had his last bowel movement, and he was scheduled for a colostomy surgery on that Thursday. The doctors were going to surgically remove his bowel, and here it was Tuesday morning. And they said, Dr. Schultz, is there anything you can do? And I said, absolutely. Bring him in and come in here as soon as possible. And they made an appointment for that afternoon. And I went to my library and I started studying my old veterinary herbal books about the bowel that had all sorts of herbs that were used on horses and even elephants that were constipated, because I knew I needed something strong for this kid. And I mixed up a formula. The kid took it that afternoon and evening, and the next morning the parents called me and that kid had a bowel movement. Now, they said it was so long in the toilet it reached from their fingers to their elbow, about 18 inches long, and they said it was so hard that they couldn't flush it down the toilet. The dad had to go out in the garage and get a shovel and chop it up so they could flush it down. And to this day, that kid's bowel works great, and I think about how his life would have been ruined if the medical doctors would have removed his bowel, and all we needed was a little common sense and a handful of herbs. After that experience, I got a flood of calls from hundreds and hundreds of people over decades in my clinic, from babies to the elderly in nursing homes. In fact, I had one baby that was brought to me that was only a few months old and was diagnosed with having Hirschsprung's disease, which is a disease where the nerves are not supplied to the bowel and the bowel doesn't work at all. And the parents asked me if there was anything I could do because they were going to perform a bowel surgery and a colostomy on a young baby. Can you believe that? And I said, absolutely. And I had this kid brought in, and I had them use herbs on this kid, and sure enough, well, this kid's an older person now and has plenty of bowel movements, and I was able to help them save the bowel of their baby. All the way to the elderly. I've had many people call me that parents and grandparents are in nursing homes, and because of the sedate lifestyle and the horrible food usually in those facilities, their parents and grandparents can't have bowel movements and were scheduled for bowel surgeries, and I was able to help them save themselves too. You know, in the past, many times in videos and writing, I've referred to the AMA as the American Murderers Association. Now, okay, I'll apologize to the few medical doctors out there who are great, but the reality and the reason I called the AMA that is because if you would have spent any amount of time in my clinic, especially the decades I did in my clinic, and saw the cutting and deforming and mutilation and burning of organs out of the body that ruined people's lives to where they committed suicide or never went on a date and lived alone in their house, to where they were in pain for the rest of their life, when all that was needed was a little common sense and a few herbs. Believe me, the medical system in America is not doing us any favors, especially when it comes to our digestion, assimilation, and elimination. So if any of you out there are considering any type of surgery, whether it's a colostomy or an ileostomy or any surgery, if it's a hysterectomy and any of you women are considering sterilizing yourself, don't do it. Or even a tonsillectomy, removing your tonsils, probably the cause of the entire polio epidemic in the first place. But stop. Stop cutting yourself. Stop disfiguring yourself. It's not necessary. And that's partly what this video is about. Especially if you're thinking of a bowel surgery, don't do it. The next part of this video is going to help you. Okay, I know that some of you out there, like my patients, think that you're an exception to the rule, or that you're different, or that maybe I didn't see anybody as sick as you, or as constipated as you, or with as bad digestion, or maybe you think because you have Crohn's disease or colitis or irritable bowel system or gastric ulcers or gastric reflux or hyperacidity or whatever, that you're an exception. You're not an exception to the rule. I saw every type of digestive assimilation and elimination complaint possible in my clinic over the decades, and I saw a lot of people a lot worse than you. So let me tell you about a few of them. You know, when I was studying, before I opened my clinic, my great teachers told me about people in extreme cases that only had one bowel movement a month. But I thought that maybe these were fish stories, you know, they exaggerated a little bit. But lo and behold, in the first month of my clinic, I had a model, 5'8", good looking, about 110 pounds, come to see me. And you can imagine how my jaw dropped when she told me she only had about one bowel movement a month when she had her period with her menstrual cycle. And I thought, wow, my teachers were telling me the truth. This is amazing. But soon after that, a 38-year-old woman, an attorney, came to see me, and she was only having one bowel movement every other month. That's 6 bowel movements a year. But that record was soon broken by Teresa from Santa Rosa, California, who came to see me, who only had 5 bowel movements in a year. In fact, that year she was pregnant, and she only had 3 bowel movements during her entire pregnancy, 1 per trimester. Imagine what that child was surrounded with. But sure enough, that wasn't it. Because a few years after that, I had a woman in my clinic who only had 2 bowel movements in a year. Now that's extreme constipation. I'm surprised she was alive. And all of these people, I helped them have normal bowel movements by just using a few herbs and changing their food program and moving a little bit, and I'll get into those in a minute. 2 last record breakers. I had one man that was doing my bowel detoxification program in Hawaii, a Hawaiian man. And overnight, he eliminated 56 pounds of fecal matter. That's right. When he weighed himself in the morning, he was 56 pounds less. Now, he had worked himself up to 46 or 47 capsules of my intestinal formula #1, and finally, he got the waste out of him. I had another woman that started at 410 pounds, and after a year on multiple bowel detoxification programs, she went down to 180 pounds. That's over 200 pounds she lost, and a lot of it was fecal matter. Now, most of you are not going to be any record breakers, and you're not going to beat the majority of people that I saw in my clinic that were ill. But you do have digestive, assimilation, and elimination problems, and this is what this video is about. Now, even if you think you're okay, the statistics, the medical statistics say you're not. First off, you must understand that colon rectal cancer is the #1 fastest growing cancer in America, and it's the #1 cancer among men and women. That's right. Much more than breast cancer in women, much more than prostate cancer in men. And of course, those two cancers, maybe because they're sexy to talk about, are the two talked about cancers in America, but many more people get and die from colon rectal cancer. And I know we hear a lot about AIDS, but 400% more people die from colon rectal cancer than from AIDS. But according to medical statistics in the medical books, every American, as they get older, will have some type of bowel disease. Now, let me give you those statistics from my book, but they're out of the Merck Manual, one of the standard medical texts for disease diagnosis and prognosis. In 1950, 10% of Americans were found, over the age of 45, were found to have diverticulosis. In 1955, that went up to 15%. In 1972, it went up to 30%. In 1987, it went up to 45%. And in the 1990s, they stated that every person will have diverticulosis in America if they live long enough. That's every person in America, if they live long enough, is going to have bowel disease, is going to have diverticulosis and bowel polyps. Now, let me tell you what they are. Diverticulosis are small saccular herniations in the wall of your colon. They're caused by constipation and gas or pressure from within your colon. Now, if 100% of us, that's all of us, have diverticula or diverticulosis or herniations in our bowel caused by the internal pressure and buildup of fecal matter by constipation, I would suggest that all of us to some degree are constipated. And these diverticuli are filled with old fecal matter that gets infected. And when they get irritated, it's called diverticulitis, and this can lead to serious bowel disease. And of course, this constipation can also cause mutation of the cells in your bowel, which causes bowel polyps. Now, sometimes they're benign and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they become malignant and cancerous, and often bowel polyps turn into malignant cancer in your bowel. So the constipation or the storage of old, toxic, poisonous fecal matter in your bowel causes everyone to have constipation to some degree, backup of fecal waste to some degree, and eventually herniations or diverticulosis and possibly bowel polyps. This is not good. So here's a good question. What's normal? What's healthy? How often should you have a bowel movement? And what should the consistency of this bowel movement be like? Well, I would highly suggest that you don't look into a health book that maybe your high school student brings home, or even any medical books, because they're going to tell you that it's normal to have 3 to 5 bowel movements a week. Okay, that's what the doctors are telling us. Of course, at the same time, these same doctors are telling us that every American, if they live long enough, is going to have bowel disease. So I think that their ignorant, stupid advice on how often we should have a bowel movement is wrong. It doesn't make sense, because if that's correct, then why do we all have bowel disease? So obviously, we need to have more than 3 to 5 bowel movements a week. Now, to discover what's normal, well, I traveled a lot around the world and studied primitive people and some of their bowel habits. Now, how many people do you know that can say that? Anyway, what I saw is that in most areas of the world where people are living naturally or primitively and eating high fibrous foods that grow in their area in season and get plenty of exercise and have very or little stress, that these people had one bowel movement a day for every major meal that they ate. So if they ate 2 major meals, they had 2 bowel movements a day. If they ate 3 major meals, they had 3 bowel movements a day. And usually those bowel movements were within 30 minutes after they finished a meal. Because when you eat food, the digesting and assimilation of that food triggers muscular action called peristalsis in your bowel, which causes previous meals to be eliminated. So what should your consistency of your bowel movement be like? Well, it shouldn't be hard-packed granite balls that I described like I had when I was a kid, or hard logs, but it should be soft. It should have a soft peanut butter-like consistency, because it shouldn't be sitting dehydrating in your bowel for days. It should be moving quickly and efficiently through your digestive tract into your colon to be eliminated. So in order to have normal, healthy, frequent bowel movements with a good consistency, I needed help. And my patients in my clinic needed help. And so we turned, like many people do, to the drugstore and were horrified with the results. And many people even turned to using herbs. But I found that most of the herbal formula on the market, especially for constipation, were antiques. I mean, there's a formula out there, it used to be called Interclean, that was designed by a man in the 1800s. I think he used this on Buffalo Bill and Wyatt Earp, but it was certainly not something that works today. In fact, many of the bowel formula on the market today, the herbal bowel formula, were designed in the 1950s. And in the 1950s, well, that was a very different time. There wasn't a fast food, fiberless junk food meal available on every corner of every major intersection in America. People ate differently, they moved differently, they weren't as sedate, they had less stress. So the formula that are available just don't work. That's the bottom line. Because today we're eating more garbage junk food than ever before in history. It has less fiber because of our higher consumption of animal foods than ever before in history. We get less movement than ever before in history because of computers and working at desks and modern transportation like automobiles. We don't move our body, so we have less bowel movements, and we have significantly higher levels of stress than 100 years ago. Did you know that if you read a newspaper in any major city for a week, that's the entire amount of information that anybody knew in their entire life 100 years ago? So don't try to tell me we don't have higher levels of stress now than ever before in history. So because none of the herbal formula worked for me or my patients in the clinic, I decided I had to start making my own much stronger, much more effective herbal formula like I talked about when I designed the one for that young boy who was 11 years old who was headed for surgery, and I had to stop that from happening. So I started using herbs for the bowel that were much stronger than what's been used in the last 100, 150 years. Again, some of these herbs were only used on large animals that were constipated. Now, some of you ask, what's the first detox I should do? Because I'm going to get on a health program. I'm going to start shopping more in a health food store and eating more fruits and vegetables and grains. And I want to get healthy. So I want to do a detox. It is always the same answer. You start with the bowel. And the reason is just simple and makes common sense. Because any detox or cleansing program or any flush program, the whole idea is to pull toxins and poisons and waste out of your body, out of your cells, out of your fat cells, out of your tissues, and out of your organs that is accumulated in you so you don't poison yourself and you don't get sick. And whenever you do any type of cleanse or detox or health program, this puts waste material inside your bowel. And if you are constipated, you are going to feel horrible. You've heard many horror stories, or at least a few of them out there, from people who did a health cleanse or a detox program and they felt horrible. They felt like crap. Well, that's why. The first thing you have to make sure is that your bowel is working efficiently and effectively and that you're eliminating your fecal matter frequently, multiple times a day. That way, when you do any other type of cleanse or detox or health program and you're pulling poisons out of your fat and muscles and different organs of your body and they're going into your bowel, they will get out quickly. You won't be reassimilating them. You won't be dragging these poisons back into your body. You'll be getting them out. So the first detox, the first cleanse you should always consider is a bowel detoxification program. And if you've done many cleanses, but you're starting again, or you haven't done one in a while, always start with the bowel first. Bowel cleansing is first. Getting your bowel working better and more effectively and more efficiently is first. Finally, in my clinic, many people came to me with, you can imagine, every health problem, every disorder, every illness, every disease known to man. There isn't anyone with any disease that I haven't heard of and that I haven't dealt with. What is amazing, though, is how a constipated, plugged bowel filled with fecal matter can cause so many seemingly unrelated diseases and illnesses in the human body. I had people, because in my clinic the first thing I did was I cleansed their bowel. I got their bowel working. I got the old fecal matter out and that bowel toned and strong and working. And then I was going to deal with the rest of their health problems. But the amazing thing that I discovered was with the majority of my patients, once their bowel was clean and working and all that toxic waste was out of them, their disease went away. Their illness went away. Their complaints, their symptoms, their problems went away. Everything from menopause and lower back problems to digestive problems to heart problems to nervous system problems to diabetes. You would be amazed. I had people with clinical depression that weren't depressed anymore. And how is this possible? Well, think about it for a minute. The bowel is a huge organ, and imagine it being impacted and constipated with fecal waste. That's going to press on everything. Your uterus is surrounded by your bowel. Imagine how it's going to feel when you have your period or your menstruation if that uterus is collapsed because of all the fecal matter and waste in your bowel that's pressing and crushing onto that uterus. It's not going to feel good. Clean the bowel and menstrual problems go away. Fertility comes back. Sexuality increases. Okay, and for you men with the prostate, it's no different. It lies right on the rectum. In fact, a prostate biopsy is done through the rectum. It's right there. And I'm talking about your kidneys and your bladder touching the bowel. Most of the organs, most of the major organs in your body, your liver with liver diseases, and your pancreas with diabetes and digestive diseases, and your lungs and your heart, they are all touching to or near your bowel. And if it is loaded with fecal matter and expanded and impacted, it's pressing on these other organs. They're not going to work as well. And even if it's not touching the organ like your brain, that waste is reabsorbing back into your bloodstream. So you're just not going to have any sweet thoughts on a sour stomach. You know, I had many, many people with depression and anxiety, and it all went away when they did a thorough bowel cleansing. It's amazing, but it's true. Finally, I'd like to give you 6 healthy, natural ways that you can get your bowel working better again. And the first one is simply drinking more water, drinking more liquids. You know, once your food is digested in your stomach and assimilated in your small intestine, it moves on to your large intestine, often called your colon or your bowel, in your large intestine. And there, one of the major jobs of the large intestine is to absorb water back into your body and dry up the contents that are coming from your small intestine, which are very slushy and very wet, and to dry up your waste a little more before it's eliminated to absorb the water. So one of the main reasons for constipation is just dehydration. People don't drink enough water and enough liquids. Did you know that you need to drink a minimum of 64 ounces, fluid ounces, that's 2 quarts of liquid a day, just for your bowel to function normally? Otherwise, your fecal matter will get too dehydrated and it causes constipation. The number 2 way to get better bowel movements is to eat more fiber. Did you know that one of the main things in the American diet is animal food? And any meat, any animal's flesh, any animal's eggs, any dairy products has 0 fiber, absolutely none. The only fiber that exists in food comes from vegetables, fruits, grains, nuts, and seeds. That's right, vegetarian food is loaded with fiber. So because of the high amount of animal food and dairy products and eggs in the American food program, there's not enough fiber, and fiber makes you have a bowel movement. So eating more fiber and cutting away or cutting out the animal food will help you have better bowel movements. The number 3 thing you can do to have better bowel movements naturally is eat more laxative type foods. And those would be foods that contain water, like fruits. We all know that apples and plums and figs and prunes and those type of foods will help you have better bowel movements. But almost any fruit will help you have better bowel movements, and vegetables and grains. I'll tell you something. Go on a diet for a couple weeks of just raw food, or even a vegetarian food program of vegetables, grains, and fruits. And you are going to be amazed at how well your bowel will work in just a couple weeks on that food program, cutting out all the constipating foods. And remember, cut out your bread too. When I say grains, I mean whole grains. I don't mean eating bread, because bread is very constipating. In fact, wallpaper paste, I don't know if any of you have ever tried to remove it from a wall, but you almost need nuclear fusion to do it, to remove wallpaper. Wallpaper paste is just made from wheat paste, so it glues onto the inside of your bowel. So stay away from refined wheat products, breads. Stay away from your animal foods and your eggs and dairy products, and increase your veggies and grains and fruits and nuts and seeds. And the next thing you know, your bowel's going to work wonderful. It's going to make an amazing difference, and your constipation will probably be gone. The number 4 way that you can help your bowel be more regular and have more frequent bowel movements is to move your body. Come on. Nowadays, we move less than ever before in history. Look, anytime we want to go anywhere, we get in a car, we get on public transportation. We don't walk anywhere anymore. And when we finally get there, when we've walked somewhere, usually we sit down. And nowadays, with the computers and the desk work, very few people are getting enough exercise. And just moving your body causes peristalsis, or causes the muscular contractions in your bowel that create a bowel movement and elimination. So we all need to move more. Number 5, emotions. Did you know that negative emotions constipate you? Positive emotions like happiness, love, joy, bliss, laughter, all those emotions help you have more bowel movements. But anger and fear and negativity, well, I used to say in my clinic, nothing positive ever comes from being negative. I'll repeat that. Nothing positive ever happens when you're negative. So get positive, start laughing more, learn more jokes, have fun, be loving, be kind, be blissed out, and your bowel's going to work a lot better. And number 6, herbs are amazing at fixing any disorders, any illness, any dis-ease of your digestion, assimilation, and elimination. And in the next part of this video, I'm going to talk to you about my 8 clinical herbal formula that I designed to fix everything that can go wrong from your mouth to your anus, and especially all the parts in between. So let's talk about the first formula, intestinal formula number 1. This formula I designed in my clinic decades ago, many, many years ago. In fact, it was one of the first versions of it that I was talking earlier about, that 11-year-old boy that came to see me that was headed for bowel surgery, and I needed to stop that from happening by getting him an herbal formula that was strong enough to make even the most severely constipated person have a bowel movement. Well, that was one of the earlier versions of this formula. But over years in the clinic, I refined this formula to do one thing: stimulate your bowel to work more often and more completely. The bottom line, pun intended, is that this formula, intestinal formula number 1, is going to cause your body to have more bowel movements more completely and more frequently. It's going to make you have more bowel movements. And again, according to modern medical texts, everybody in America is suffering from diseases because they're constipated, because their bowel isn't working enough. Intestinal formula number 1 makes you have more bowel movements. That's what it does. What's in intestinal formula number 1? Well, 8 very important and very effective herbs. The first ones are curacao and Cape aloes. These are an equatorial version or variety of aloe vera, but much stronger. Aloe vera, as all of you know, we commonly use it for sunburns and to aid our digestion. But these equatorial aloes, sometimes referred to as aloes spicata or aloes ferox, contain much more of the anthraquinone, which is called amodin, which causes you to have peristalsis or muscular contractions in your bowel. Aloes, Cape, and curacao are one of the most effective, one of the strongest herbs on the planet to create your bowel to have muscular movement, which causes you to have a bowel movement. Another herb in the formula is senna. I use both the leaves and the pods of senna. Now, senna has been used for thousands and thousands of years. It used to grow in the Nile Delta in Alexandria. In fact, the old senna used to be called Alexandrian senna. And senna again contains the anthraquinones, amodin, so it's a very powerful herb like aloes at causing the muscular contractions in your bowel. And the third in this group is Cascara sagrada, which comes from the Pacific Northwest in the Americas. So popular with the American Indians, they called it sacred bark. They thought it was a sacred plant. Obviously, they knew that helping you to have a bowel movement could help heal just about anything that was wrong with you. Many people that came to me in the clinic, I needed to get them to have a bowel movement right now, immediately. Well, not exactly in that moment, but by the next day. And I couldn't necessarily get them to follow the good food program or the exercise program or become a positive thinker overnight. Of course, I wanted them to eventually do all of that, and I put them on programs to do that. But I needed their bowels to work the next day. And these bowel herbs, these anthraquinone herbs, work directly on the tissue of your colon to make it move. They're very effective. In fact, in naturopathic school, we used to take these herbs and rub them on a dissected bowel that was removed from the human body, and the bowel would still move. Now, I've never tried to have a dead person have a bowel movement, but I almost believe you could, because these herbs, what's important here is these herbs do not require you or your assistance physically, emotionally, or spiritually to have a bowel movement. They're going to make it happen anyway. And that's important because, like I said, I want you to eat right, move right, and think right, but I can't make all those programs kick in 24 hours, but I can make your bowels work in 24 hours. Now, also in this formula is barberry root or Oregon grape root, a similar plant. And this plant contains berberine, and it makes your liver purge its bile. So it's mildly liver cleansing, but most importantly, bile is a natural laxative. Once it goes through your gallbladder or your bile ducts or your common bile duct and gets into your duodenum and gets into your colon, it has a natural laxative effect. But cleaning your liver is a good part of a bowel cleanse. There's also ginger in this formula, very important. The Chinese call ginger the downward herb. And ginger is there to keep everything moving downward. You have peristalsis.